All right, welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast. It is another week. It's another edition of our football position previews. I'm Stephen Igoe. We've got Maceo Donald, former ECU football player, former ECU running back. He's back with us. He didn't hate it, so he's back with us for a second show. Maceo, I'm really excited to have you on just because you were in this running back room. You've been in the receiver room as well, the slot receivers. So these next two position previews will be pretty close to your heart, man. So
Yeah,
you fired up today?
yeah, I am. I already talked to Rahjai today a little bit, so he knows I'm on here. He's probably watching right now too, so very excited.
No pressure, no pressure. We are live on YouTube, live on Facebook. If you got a question, drop it in the comments. We'll get to it in the show. If you're watching on Twitter, we can't really see the comments as easily, so drop them on YouTube, Facebook if you can. We'll get to those during this program. If you were with us last week, you kind of know the format. We're going to go through kind of each of the scholarship players in the room, talk about the expectations, potential role for each. We'll also give our projection as far as who we think may play the most. And I didn't warn Maceo about this, but we're going to go with our favorite ECU running back at the end of the show again. I don't know if Maceo, if you can pick yourself, you can do
Yeah,
that. But if you want to pick somebody else, we'll make that pick as well.
this one's gonna be
Um,
hard.
yeah, you got a bunch of friends in that room. The
Yeah,
real question is, did you make anybody mad last week in your debut?
nah, I made sure I talked to Flynn and made sure we were all good. So I think this week will be good also.
Nice, nice. Hey, it's the off season, it's the preseason. Everybody's happy, you know. If we get you
Yeah,
on in season, it may be a little bit more difficult, man. But no, it's all good, man. You provided great insight last week. We got a ton of feedback, a ton of views for last week's episode. So I know a lot of people enjoyed your insight as well. So thanks for coming back. Maceo Donald again with us, former ECU player. And he was in this position room at times last year, going back and forth between running backs and the slots. So let's get into this discussion first, Maceo, with you've played this position. You know this offense. You kind of know what makes a successful running back in this offense. So, how much goes into it? You know, the fans, they see a guy carrying the football and whether he gets tackled or not, but there's a lot more that goes into it. So, take us through how much is on you guys' plate as a running back in this offense.
yeah, definitely. And regardless of position, is very hard. Being a Division 1 athlete in football for sure, but specifically for the running back position, you got to be able to do a little bit of everything. Got to be able to run hard. Got to be able to be fast, catch passes, pass block for the quarterback. So you really got to be versatile and locked in at all moments. To be honest with you, you got to have quick feet, great hands. Got to be able to really do everything and got to be very trustworthy because you're the last line of protection for the quarterback most times. So you got to be very punctual, ready to go, and locked in.
They always say too that ball security is job security.
Yeah,
So on top of that, you got to protect the rock, right? If you're fumbling, you're
yeah,
not going to play.
yeah. The ball's a program. They always say that the ball's a program. So you got to hold that ball with everything you got.
So we were in spring ball, and I guess the first day of spring practice coverage, I was out there and noticed. I want to say Chris Foster worked the first day of spring ball. Either way, he basically let the team know he was going to Northwestern on the first
Yeah,
day of spring practice, and you worked under Chris Foster a little bit. They've since moved Raekwon Boyette from receivers to running backs, which he was a running backs coach previously. He was also a running back at Duke, so I think he's comfortable with that move, but losing Chris Foster the first day of spring practice, that had to be a challenge to the guys. Definitely right, Maceo?
yeah, definitely. And Coach Foster, he's one of those players, coaches, and everybody loved him. He was always really good with us. Just not on the field, but off the field also. We all had really good relationships with him and personal relationships with him also. But all the guys kind of understand, and in this room now, we guys are kind of getting older and are more mature, so they understand the business. They understand you got to keep moving forward to win games, and regardless of your coaches.
So a lot of depth in this room, and we'll go through some of the names real quick. I tell you, what, let's touch on kind of the group as a whole, and then we'll go through each of these guys individually. So Rahjai Harris, the I guess he's the elder statesman now, as far
Yeah,
as
he
being
is.
the old guy, which is hard to believe. The old head, as you guys probably say in the room, coming off the knee injury, which we'll get into. Marlon Gunn had a very successful freshman year. He's back. Gerald Green comes in as an older guy, as a veteran. He actually transferred in to play with Chris Foster because he used to work under him at Georgia Southern. So interesting dynamic there, but had a really good spring. Pop McKay, Camaro Edmonds are back. guys that have talent, we're still kind of waiting to see them put it all together. And then Javius Bond, the true freshman running back. Those are your 6 scholarship guys, and they got Grayson Clue and C.J. Armstrong as walk-ons in the room. So this is, to me, Maceo, one of the deepest positions on the team. And honestly, I'm really excited about how it's going to shake out.
Yeah, it is a very deep room, and you got a lot of older guys in Rahjai and Gerald, and you also got a lot of young guys who can play and potentially have a chance to get on the field as young players. You have Marlon Gunn coming back for his sophomore season. He had a very good sophomore season, and I'm excited to see what Javius Bond is going to do, and also Camaro Edmonds and Pop McKay. I think those guys have a lot of potential, and like you said, just waiting to see them put it all together.
Just as a guy, and I guess this goes with every position, but a guy outside looking in at running back at this level in this offense, Maceo, like I see it as the person the coaches trust the most, from blocking, executing the right assignment, catching the football, not fumbling, are going to be the guys that can play. Of course, you got to be able to make guys miss. You got to be able to make positive yardage. But to me, like, if the coaches don't trust you as a running back, it's going to be hard to play. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fact. And like, that's all positions also. And running back, like I said earlier, you got to have to be able to do a lot of things and be able to think quickly on your feet. You got to know the protections, got to know the mic calls, things like that. And definitely have to hold on to the ball. And, that's one thing that will turn the coaches off from you, is if you're fumbling a lot. So you got to be able to protect the ball, and, got to be able to make some plays also.
All right, let's look at this room. We'll go one by one, and we'll start with Rahjai Harris, the 4th-year running back. Of course, had the standout freshman season, came back, was a solid player in 2021, and then had the injury after a good start to the 2022 campaign. He is scheduled to be full go by preseason camp. He missed the spring, but he was out there. He was trying to practice, man. He was always involved. It was awesome to see him in the spring. Last year, scored 5 touchdowns in 5 games, had 238 rushing yards before the unfortunate injury at USF. And I think that, Rahjai, we all know what he can do when he's healthy, Maceo. It's just a matter of, are we going to see the same Rahjai day one? Is it going to take some time to knock the rust off? I just don't think that's something we necessarily know until we see him out there.
Yeah. First off, Rahjai is a great leader, great person. And, he's definitely one of those people that can't wait to get it back on the field. And I know he's doing everything he can to get back to himself and then some. Like you said, Rahjai had 5 touchdowns in 5 games last year. So that's a touchdown a game. So he's very productive, very strong guy, can do a lot of different things. He's a great catch. He can catch the ball really well. And I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he just has to get back, get healthy, knock that rust off, and just get back to himself. But I think everyone there is going to be supporting him and just waiting for him to kind of get to that moment where we see that Rahjai from last year and the years before is back.
We talked about it a little bit last week, but I want to see these running backs involved more in the passing game and the offense. I know maybe you do as well. I feel like if Rahjai is that number 1, number 2 back, however many they end up playing, like that's a big part of his skill set. And I just hope we see that this year. Just your thoughts on, maybe seeing more of that with Rahjai.
Yeah, I think this year specifically is going to be very different. Obviously, you're losing Keaton Mitchell, and Rahjai is one of those people that's been here the last few years that you still have to see how healthy he'll be. So just in general, this running back room, I think, is going to be kind of a collection of talent, to do and have an objective and complete that objective. But Rahjai can do all those things, and you have a lot of other guys in the room that are versatile as well. But I think Rahjai specifically as a leader of that group, and once he gets back healthy, I think he'll be able to do a lot of that, catching the ball, getting out in space a little bit. And he's still big enough to where he can run people over and get out of those holes pretty fast.
We're 9 minutes in. We just had our first Keaton Mitchell reference. So I somehow forgot to mention it myself, which I think will be a big part of our conversation later in terms of how this, maybe they divvy up the carries, the yardage, how that's going to work out. Because I think it will be more by committee, basically more so than maybe we saw last year, especially after Rahjai's injury. All right, Marlon Gunn is next on our list. And you want to talk about a guy who just, to me, looked the part in the spring. Like, he looked good as a freshman, but physically, like, he looks like a running back should look. And I thought he, in the spring game, he ran over one of the transfer safeties at one time, knocked him back about 5 yards out of bounds. Like, this dude, you don't want to see him in the open field one-on-one. But he's a physical presence, definitely, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what they're feeding those boys down in Louisiana, but he's definitely eating all of it. Marlin is a great dude, great kid, very mature for his age, very strong, very powerful. He can do a lot of different things as well. I'm excited to see him kind of loosen up a little bit. Like we said earlier, I think his freshman year, especially as a true freshman, he was just trying to protect the ball and fall forward as much as he can. And so I'm excited to see him kind of loosen up a little bit and get into some of his moves and make people miss in open space. I think he had almost 400 rushing yards last year and still no touchdowns, which is okay. But I think this year we want to see him get in the box more.
Yeah, with his size, man. I mean, it seems like him and Rahjai would be some dudes you don't want to see
Yeah,
in the red zone. And you mentioned Marlin last year. Yeah, 364 as far as gain, 344 net yards, 5.1 yards per carry.
yeah,
So, good yards per rush average. And I agree with you. I thought there were times like he could have made guys miss in the open field, but he almost like seeked out the contact instead of
yeah,
running around him, which, is part of the evolution of young players, and
right.
I think he's going to make a big stride this year. And to me, and Gerald Green falls into this category too. We'll talk about him in a second. But like when I've talked to Marlon, when I've talked to Rahjai, and when I've talked to sources about him, like these two guys just seem like, you know, just the consummate professionals in college football in terms of they
Right.
show up on time, they're trustworthy, they put the work in. There's no shortcuts with these guys. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. And Rajay, I know he's the older guy, but like I said about Marlon too and Gerald, Gerald has played a lot of games. Rajay has played a lot of games. Marlon will end up playing a lot of games, but all those guys are very mature and you can really count on them. And especially Rajay, I mean, he tore his ACL week 5 against USF, I think. And I mean, that next week he took a little bit of time off, but after that, I mean, he was back like he never left, like he was still suiting up with us on game day. So, I mean, he's probably one of the main leaders in that locker room, if I had to say. And I think a lot of guys respect him and listen to him. So, I mean, he definitely does everything the right way.
He always talks about the 1%. To
Yeah.
go back to Rahjai, do y'all, when you were on the team, do you feel like the teammates kind of feed off that too, like improving 1%? Because it is kind of cliche, but it's kind of also become his rallying cry to a degree.
Yeah, no, it's definitely his rallying cry. And he started posting that on Twitter. He's always on Twitter.
Yeah.
But he started posting that, every day. And that's just speaks to the kind of person he is, how focused he is about the game. And, all the coaches love him. And Coach Houston kind of adopted it after Rajay and, it became a team thing. And, we're just trying to stack days and stack weeks. And I know Rajay's doing that right now in rehab and recovering and getting back on the field.
All right, Gerald Green, we mentioned him earlier. He comes in as a grad student with 2 years of eligibility left remaining, and another guy who's just put up steady numbers throughout his time. I just pulled him up. So he put up 33 games with Georgia Southern. He rushed for a total of 1,456 yards. He scored 13 touchdowns. And the biggest thing that stood out to me about Green when ECU was recruiting him is his pass protection, according to Pro Football Focus, graded out top notch as well. So it just seems like maybe nothing is going to jump off the page if you just turn on the tape necessarily from Gerald, but just a really solid all around back. What have you heard? I know he joined after you had left the team, but have you heard good things about Gerald?
Yeah, I've met Gerald a couple times. Seems like a great guy. I know he's an older classman, so he's ready to roll regardless. He's kind of that plug and play player. Like you said, he can pass protect. I know he's kind of a strong guy, very explosive, can do a lot of different things. I think he has a chance of, getting a lot of playing time this year and being very effective when he's in. I know he's at Georgia Southern with Coach Foster before, so he's very well coached, and I know he'll be ready to do what he has to do.
All right, that is 3 of the 6 scholarship players in the running back room at this moment. The other 3, we'll go through them now as well. And to me, the 3 we just kind of touched on, we'll touch on this here in a bit, is kind of the 3 guys I expect to be a main part of the rotation, at least to begin with. But
Yeah.
you got some other guys with big talent in this room, Maceo. 2 guys that have been in the program a little bit now. We're kind of waiting on them to take the next step. One of those guys is Pop McKay. Had a good spring, and I know he's dealt with some injuries in the past, but to me, like, it was his best spring since he got to ECU, and he's shown flashes at times. What do you feel like is maybe the next step for Pop McKay, who's another bigger physical
Yeah.
back when he gets going?
Yeah, I think for Pop is just, just staying focused. And as a younger guy, it can kind of be hard. A lot of things are thrown at you very fast. And especially for him, he was coming in with Keaton and Rahjai as his older guys, so they can do everything kind of already. And when you say go, they're ready to go. And, that can be an adjustment for a younger player. But Pop, I think he'll put it together. He's a very big guy, like you said. And I think he has some sneaky speed to him as well. So I'm excited to see what he'll do. I just want to make sure they're all in shape and all kind of focused and ready to go when fall camp gets here.
Camaro Edmonds, another one of those guys, came in as a North Carolina transfer, Havelock product. So a lot of people in Eastern North Carolina were excited about him. Great player in high school, big time recruit out of high school. Didn't play his first year at UNC a whole lot and hasn't played a ton here at ECU. He did play. I know he got in the game a couple times last year. I know he played in the bowl game as well, got a few
Yeah,
carries. So your assessment of Camaro, who, again, still a younger player. I think he's only a sophomore, so it's not like
right.
he doesn't have any eligibility left, time to grow. So what do you see out of Camaro?
Yeah, I mean he's very similar to Pop, a little bit bigger. I think he's a very strong guy, and he also has a little bit of sneaky speed and agility to him as well. Like you said, he was a big time recruit out of Havelock, and a lot of those guys we've had on our team have been productive for us. So I know he's very well coached, and I'm excited for Camaro also. And I think that he has a few steps he has to keep continuing to go up and develop as a player. Understanding the playbook from top to bottom, and you know the biggest thing at the end of the day is protecting the quarterback and protecting the ball. But I think Camaro is coming along, and I'm really excited for him as well. He's one of my 252 guys right up the road from me in Havelock, so I'm very excited for him, and I hope he does really well and pushes himself this fall.
Javius Bond, the true freshman. We kind of touched on him a little bit
Yeah,
last week, Maceo, but we've heard a lot of good things. And again, another young guy, true freshman. He should
yeah,
just be leaving high school, but he got into college a semester early, which I think helps him.
yeah,
And there are things he's got to learn, like pass protection, like his assignments. But as far as playmaking ability and home run speed, he may honestly be already near the top of the room. Just
yeah.
what are fair expectations for a freshman like him, who that there are areas he's going to have to mature in, but he obviously has the ability.
Yeah, he definitely has that ability, and I think the ceiling is very high for him. And I think he's probably the fastest guy in that room and kind of the lightning to everyone's thunder in the running back room right now. So I think he has a lot of potential. And I said it last week, I told you this, that I think he honestly could get some time early in this season. I don't know if they want to burn his red shirt or not, but I kind of expect Rahjai to, he has to work himself back into the game. So I could see JV as getting some time earlier in the season. And I think he could also be a pass threat and even a punt returner as well and kick returning threat. He has some speed and some quickness as well. So that's very valuable, and he can be, very dangerous for some of those explosive plays.
Yeah, I think it just based off my conversations, I expect him to play. And
Yeah.
I want to say Donnie Kirkpatrick said in an interview, like it's almost like he's gonna play at this point. We're not even gonna worry about redshirting him. And of course, things can change.
Yeah.
Guys, if Rahjai comes back and he's raring to go, and you're already 3 deep, 4 deep, and one of these other guys emerges, maybe you don't need as much Javius, and you can keep the redshirt on him. But I think we're going to see him in the return game. There's a good chance, at least, and I think he's going to play, which will be interesting. There have been true freshmen like Keaton Mitchell and like Rahjai who have played big roles as running back, and at that time the room wasn't quite as deep, maybe, but
Yeah.
it's been done before under this staff. Bubba Rosenbaum says on YouTube, got an interesting comment here. He said, "We only turned the ball over 7 times last year, which is unheard of. Our next best was 2007 when we turned it over 14 times. For reference, in the championship seasons of 08-09, we had 28 and 23."
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, so the pick Holton Ahlers threw against Tulane, that was the final
That's the last
turnover of the year.
turnover. Yeah.
That's insane, man. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
what like some of that I think has to be luck, but also it's like you guys obviously drill it in practice. I'm sure y'all did ball
Yeah.
security a ton.
Definitely. I mean, and talking about Holton, I mean, he was a vet. All of our receivers were vets. Rahjai and Keaton were both vets in the running back room who we're talking about today. So, I mean, we kind of had a couple years with each other. So at that point, you're not really trying to make many mistakes, and we didn't make too many mistakes towards the end of that season, halfway towards the end of the season. But ball carrying, holding the ball too as well is a big thing, and having no fumbles. And I don't think Keaton or Rahjai really fumbled the ball much last year as well. But I mean, that's a combination of everybody. The line protecting, the running backs protecting, Holton making the right reads, and the receivers catching the ball. So a lot goes into it. It's not just one person or a few people. It's the whole team, the whole offense.
Yeah, I think it's a combination effort for sure. The O line, we always give the credit to the quarterback, receivers, running backs, but they were as big a part as anybody as the 3,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher, and two 1,000-yard receivers last year, which was the first time in program history all that has been accomplished in 1 year. And I thought the O line is a big reason why that was even possible. All right, so those are your 6 scholarship backs. We mentioned the walk-on, C.J. Armstrong, Grayson Clue. There may be a few incoming walk-ons as well. Javius was the only freshman scholarship player in this recruiting class, and we'll see, who kind of emerges from what looks to be a stellar group of walk-ons as well with this group. So Maceo, like for me, I'm looking at this room. It's deep. I feel like this staff wants to play at least 3 backs. Is that fair? Like, is that kind of the vibe you're getting? Like, because Keaton Mitchell was we like to call him a unicorn because he just did things that nobody else could do. For me, like, do you feel like this is going to be a by committee approach unless somebody just takes the lead job and rolls with it?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be like, those spy movies where you have the tech guy, the big strong guy who can fight, the thinker. I think it's gonna be by committee. And these guys, they do a lot of the same things, but they also have a lot of differences as well. So I definitely see Marlin. He's going to be in the rotation for sure. Gerald's going to be in the rotation. As you said, you think Javius probably will be in the rotation as well. And we already know what Rahjai can do, and we're just waiting for him to really get back to his self, that 100%. So, it's going to be very challenging to see who comes out on Saturdays, because you have a lot of options. But I think that's a good thing also.
Yeah, I mean, I really think if I had to make a prediction now, I think you got to go Rahjai and Marlin, kind of your 1A and 1B, assuming Rahjai's, back to 100% or close to it. And then Gerald, definitely kind of a 2 or 3. And then, who's going to step up after that maybe? Because I feel like those 3 at this point, we talked about trust. I think the coaching staff trust all of them. I think Javius has shown he has the talent. Can he earn that trust? And then if, Pop McKay or Camaro have one of those preseasons that they're capable of happening, maybe they make their way into the rotation too. That's just kind of how I see it right now. And, we'll see. I'm with you though. I don't really see is there a clear-cut starting back? I think there are some real similarities here with these guys. And maybe it's just a hot hand situation, Maceo, where you ride the hot hand.
Yeah, probably something like that. And for me, I kind of see Marlon maybe starting out as that guy, maybe getting the first snap of the game and against Michigan. Like I said, we don't really know how well Rahjai will be once at least those first couple games. So I see Marlon starting it out, and Gerald obviously getting a lot of playing time. I mean, he's a vet. He's had a lot of experience at Georgia Southern. But, it's very hard to decide right now, looking, in June, almost July. It's very hard to say right now. And I think Camaro and Pop could have one of those camps. Like you said, you never know with those guys because they do have a lot of talent.
All right, I'm putting you in a tough spot here, Maceo. Actually, 2 tough spots because this is a question I didn't prepare you for. But let's say it's 4th and goal from the 1, game on the line, and the defense knows it's going to be a running play. Who are you giving the ball to if you're the offensive coach among this group? Rahjai?
Yeah. I mean, I could pick someone else, but I've just seen Rahjai do it too many times. I saw him against NC State, score that late touchdown for us, probably on the 1 or 2 yard line. So, I've seen Rahjai do that. He has that experience, and, he won't be scared of the moment also. Marlon is definitely one of those guys that can do it too, but, I just have to put the ball in Rahjai's hands. We've seen him do it too much.
So, and I agree. I would go Rahjai as well. So last year, Keaton Mitchell had 1,452 yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. That's a lot of yards to replace. Again, Marlin 344, Rahjai 238. Holton had 182 net yards. I think, we talked about Mason Garcia last week. I think he's going to play a big part of this running game as well. But where do you think, do you think this ends up being a situation, Maceo, where it's like, let's say Rahjai or Marlin have 700 apiece or something like that. Do you think it could be a 1,000-yard rusher among this group, or do you feel like it's more spread out?
I think this year will be more spread out. If Rahjai wasn't coming off an injury, I would say Rahjai would probably be getting at 1,000 yards this year. Um, he'll be very productive in as far as touchdowns, but yards, I think if he hadn't got hurt, he'd definitely get that 1,000 this year. I think you still have a few special guys in that room that can do it, and also Mason, I can see them running him a lot also as well. He's a big guy and he can do that also if they decide to start him towards the season. But Rahjai, Marlon, Gerald, I think those are going to be the big three guys at least to start it off. And I think Javius will kind of give you that versatile, line him up in the slot, even maybe catches some swing passes, not too much he has to think about, just free release and catch the ball and get upfield. So I think we'll see a lot of different guys, and it's really so hard to tell right now. And it's really hard to tell, and you just don't know at this point.
Yeah, no, there's 100. This is probably like the deepest room to me, and the room
Yeah.
where if I had to project like a stat line, I don't know. I don't feel very comfortable in it either way, just because there's so much unknown. Um, Brandon says, "How close is Rahjai to 100%?" I don't know if you've spoken with him recently. I feel like he's getting back there. I know that they're
Yeah.
planning to clear him for preseason camp, which starts early August. Have you heard or talked to Rahjai recently?
Well, I talked to Rahjai earlier. We didn't really talk about,
Yeah.
how he was doing too much, but I think he'll be okay once that season starts. Obviously, they'll kind of start him out slow in fall camp and, see how he does. And Rahjai is an upperclassman, so it's not like he needs every snap like a Javius might need, or even a Gerald getting into a new offensive system, or even a Marlin just as a true sophomore. So I think Rahjai, he doesn't need as much of the everyday reps as maybe a younger guy would. So, I mean, I could say probably that 1 or 2 games, I think he'll probably be getting back to where he was, but I think it would take him, most of the season. And I think we can see some improvements as well in some of the how his game has changed also.
We talked about pass protection earlier, Maceo, and you kind of had to probably adjust. That was probably one of your biggest adjustments going from slot receiver
Yeah.
to running back, man. Like obviously you do some blocking out on the perimeter and the slot too, but I got to ask, like, is that like what's the biggest challenge of that? Is it a mindset thing that you kind of just know some dude's going to be running at you and probably knock you down, but you just have to get in his way?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, the 1 or 2 guys that you'll probably end up blocking, and it's just about wanting to. It's a want-to mentality, and any of them can do it. They changed the cutting rules a little bit, so you got to stay up high a little bit more than you used to in the past years. But I mean, all those guys can do it. Stay square. Have a good position, and just do what you got to do. Do it for the team. Do it for your quarterback. Do it for your boys out there. So it's a lot of want to.
Who was the toughest guy you had to step up and block in practice for ECU? Like if y'all were running good on good, was there a tough one?
At back, I would say Bruce Bivens was the hardest guy to block.
I can see that.
Coming straight at your face. In the slot, though, I'd probably say Tegan maybe, or Juju. Those are, a lot of physical guys. We had Jira Wilson as well, but they were, that long arms guys who were kind of try to shed you. But, at running back, definitely Bruce Bivens and probably Xavier Smith also.
I just remember watching Bruce just go in there with reckless abandon. Like he didn't care about getting to the quarterback. He just wanted to kill the running back. So I don't know if he was like that in practice, but in a game, man, he played with his head on fire. So
yeah, he definitely did.
I can see that being tough. All right, as we wrap this up, Maceo, let's pick our favorite ECU running backs ever. Do you want me to go first, or you want to get this out of the way?
Well, no, you go first. You go first.
All right. So, I mean, I feel like the obvious answer is Chris Johnson. I'm going to steer away from that just because it's the obvious answers. I'm going to go with a guy that I enjoyed covering. This is kind of a homer pick like last week. I picked Shane Carden because I went to school with him and I was just starting to hoist the colors at that time. I'm going to go with the running back on that team, Ventavious Cooper. Before Keaton Mitchell had 1,000 yards, Ventavious Cooper was the last running back in an ECU uniform to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He was a great interview. He had an awesome story because he went from not even having a scholarship offer as a JUCO quarterback to being offered by Lincoln Riley, I think the day after signing day, came to ECU and just became this awesome running back out of nowhere. So I'm going to take Cooper as my favorite running back ever. Maceo will put the pressure on you now.
I'll do someone I didn't play with. I'll go with Chris Johnson also. And a funny story, I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, but was born in Memphis, Tennessee. So I used to watch the Tennessee Titans a lot. And I like Chris Johnson. He had the dreads. He wore 28. And I actually had 28 for my first few years at ECU. But I never knew he went to ECU probably until like high school. So, and I lived two hours down the road. So growing up, Chris Johnson was probably my favorite running back. He had the speed, he had the swag with his touchdown dance. But players that I played with, running backs that I played with, that's really hard. I love all those guys. We're all still very close, still have group chats and everything like that. But they're all great people, great players, and I think they have a lot more they can do also professionally and in college.
Yeah, I would make it real tough to make you rank the running backs you played with, but we'll save that for another show.
Yeah.
By the way, Chris Johnson, man, you've probably done this just as a fan of CJ2K, but his YouTube highlight video of him with the Titans is like the most insane clips. Like I think people don't realize how good he was in that like 3 or 4 year span where he was in his prime. Yeah. He was just special, man. And Keaton reminded me of CJ in some ways, and he honestly had a better college career than Chris Johnson. So before we get out of here, what do you think about Keaton Mitchell's fit with the Ravens as an undrafted guy? You think he's got a good chance there?
Yeah, I think Keaton has a great chance there. With all that speed he has, it's hard for someone not to at least try him out somewhere. Maybe if it's a returner, and even in the backfield. We saw that picture with him and Lamar Jackson on social media, and it was like, that backfield would be hard to stop in that read option. But Keaton was a special player in college, and watching him these last few years was a pleasure. And seeing it in person live, it was like we'd run mid zone right, he'd end up in the end zone all the way to the left. So he was very special, and I'm gonna miss watching him play. But I'm also excited for these new guys here, and I'm excited to see Rahjai get back, to that 4.7 who he was. So I'm ready to see that also.
No doubt, a lot of exciting things. And yeah, the BYU game last year, I feel like Keaton he would just run around the entire BYU defense. Yeah. Like it was like just their line would penetrate and he would just go whoop. But that's a whole nother story. Special player, gonna miss him, but excited about this running back room for sure. Maceo, again, this was awesome, man. We've gone about 30 plus minutes. I feel like we've been talking like 10 minutes. So
I know, right?
This is good stuff. So I got a question too. We're doing receivers next. The real question is, should we go like all receivers and tight ends as one, or should we split it up? Kind of how ECU does. Should we go inside receivers and tight ends as one preview and outside receivers as another? What do you think?
It's tough, especially these past couple years. We've used guys inside and out. We had Ryan Jones doing a lot of outside receiver stuff, maybe even out there by himself sometimes. We had Isaiah Winstead in the slot. Jalen Johnson just came to the slot also. I think that's a tough one. We got to talk about it off air.
Yeah.
We also had Tyler Snead and Blake Prohl being able to do a lot of different things also, my old roommates. So, we'll have a lot of good players to talk about, but we might should just do receivers and then just tight ends by himself with Shane and the boys.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was leaning, and we could figure it out for sure. But we'll have some sort of receivers preview next week, and we'll discuss how to do it. By the way, before we get out of here, last shout out from Bubba. He says Junior Smith, 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, often forgotten. He was also a former ECU running backs coach. I just saw Junior a few months ago at Firehouse Subs randomly. He's up to a lot of good stuff. He also says Leonard Henry's 2001 season often forgot. Yeah, Leonard Henry was a stud. Needs to be in the Hall of Fame. Hopefully that'll happen this fall. All right, Maceo, appreciate your time, man. We'll talk to you again next week. Yes, and I feel like you're already a natural at this, so this is going well.
Trying.
He's Maceo Donald. I'm Stephen Igoe. This has been the Hoist the Colours podcast. We'll talk to you guys next week. We'll also have a basketball podcast as well with Keaton Mitchell as he'll join us as we continue that along with this football position preview. So talk to you guys next week. Thanks for listening.